Oh, hello there. Yes, well, good grief, bit of a damp weekend. Not great to be hanging around outside a migrant hotel, I would imagine. Probably going to want to start a fire to keep you warm. Anyway, those people outside migrant hotels should be reasonably safe from those vicious Antifa types because their police overlords or something will be too busy arresting pensioners, who are, of course, the armed and vicious wing of Palestine Action, ACA Hamas. Yeah, should be pretty safe, I would imagine, with those old ladies being dragged off the streets, because we can't have hurty words, can we? Can't have hurty words. Yes, anyway, apropos of nothing, I had to smile at this. Daniel Hannanan, who, having made a career of being wrong, managed to propel himself into the House of Lords. Of course he does. Nice pension if you can get it. Yeah, he wrote this. Everyone dislikes traffickers. I'm not quite sure they do. I imagine there are people that are sort of quite keen on people traffickers, probably married to them. Anyway, but do you know who I dislike even more? Is it everybody, Daniel? Let's see. The human rights lawyers who go to Calais and hand out their numbers, sometimes on phones in waterproof pouches, for the illegals to call them on arrival. Once more, France is a safe country. Yes, that's Daniel for you. And, well, yes, indeed. Yes, it is a safe country. Not that that's got to do with anything, because he doesn't really understand the law, but it got me thinking about all of those people that are entrepreneurs. You know, we need to encourage entrepreneurialism in this country, and it strikes me that these lefty lawyers have spotted a gap in the market and rightly are exploiting it. That's capitalism, which is very good, isn't it? Yeah, it's very good, those things, when they're exploited. It's very good when those things are exploited, I do believe. Yes, anyway, of course, yes, Daniel Hannan, who, well, is a man who is so wonderfully has the ability to see into the future that recently he got burnt for days, and it's still happening days and days and days on end about his predictions for Brexit, which, believe it or not, haven't exactly come true. Still, thank God for our commentariat, yes. And they themselves are being highly paid, of course they are, to maintain their bigotry. And one of the things that they are chipping away at, inevitably, is the new government's RSE announcement. It came a few weeks ago, if you like, no, about a week ago properly. Didn't mention about it then because I was sort of waiting to see if there were going to be any more guidance issued. They haven't. The government's going to give more guidance around sex education in schools later on in the year, which is probably going to be appalling. But leaving that aside, I mean, the current guidance, education, relationships and sex education and health education, statutory guidance for school, blah, 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 that one, right? Okay, link down below if you want to read it for yourself. Has managed to please nobody because the government have faffed the issue somewhat. Loads of people, when there was when the government were asking for people to write in about this, wrote in and said that they basically don't want children to be shown the idea that there's anything at all, such as between their legs, because that would be bad. Yes, these are the people that fully understand that. The reason why there were no gay people in the 90s was because of Section 28, and because the last very long Conservative government didn't really like sex education. It's one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons why we had one of the highest teenage pregnancy rates in Europe. Still, that's just factual stuff that we can ignore, because there's nothing like thrusting your own morality on children, especially if you can't actually deal with reality. Anyway, the issue about this is that it suggests that all the onus will be on me to do the right thing, and if I don't do the right thing, then parents will probably have the right to create a fuss about it. And all of those glorious commentariat types who make a living out of chipping away at things will jump up and down about it. Now, what Sex Matters and the rest of them do is they, number one, whenever this type of guidance comes out, they jump up and down and insist that their version of the law is the law, even when it's not. They then get umpteen articles in the Mail and expressly, sorry to say that, but expressly, not in the Express, but in the Daily Telegraph for weeks on end, where they try to persuade everybody that their view of the world is in fact reality, when it isn't. They did that around CAS, for example, and the whole puberty blockers thing, which incidentally weren't recommended in CAS, but we just ignore that because it's now inconvenient. And when, finally, people wake up to the fact that they might not be telling the truth, they then find some minor little, usually a Christian who's a concerned parent, in inverted commas, or a concerned teacher, what got fired or something, and they make an enormous fuss about it and highly fund a case where they therefore use that, even when they lose the case, which is quite common, they find some little thing in the legal proceedings of the case to demand that the law gets changed to what they said it was in the first place. Yes, rinse, repeat, as people say. That's what they do. After all, Maria Forrester and Helen and the rest of them, your James S's, now make a living doing this. So the one thing they're not going to do is suddenly decide that they're going to stop at any point. They will never stop until people like me aren't allowed to do anything. And it's pretty much the same with the Christian lot as well. They won't stop until I'm not allowed to do sex education at all. Anyway, let's look at what the actual notes about the real stuff in and around trans, because that's realistically what we're talking about here, is. Pupils should also be taught the facts and the law about biological sex and gender reassignment. Yes, okay, we can teach the law. Good. You'll notice that this is no ban on things at all, no matter what, various people say, it isn't. They should recognise that people have legal rights by virtue of their biological sex, which is different from the rights of those of the opposite sex with the protected characteristic of gender reassignment. Yeah, in other words, there are trans people and they're protected under law because, they have rights as citizens. And I'm allowed to do that, especially in my job. Some of the things that I do a reasonable amount of things around this. Indeed, around stuff like sociology. Pupils should also be taught to recognise that people with a protected characteristic of gender reassignment, as with other protected characteristics, have protection from discrimination and should be treated with respect and dignity. Yes, indeed. So I think we can all agree with that. Well, no, we can't all agree with that, of course, because certain people shouldn't be treated with respect and dignity, should they? Because, they're just blokes in dresses. Speaking of somebody who's been working with trans people since the 1990s, I don't know, seem to recall back then they were blokes in dresses, but there were also a load of people who weren't blokes in dresses. There were a load of people who were just miserable blokes because they didn't think they were blokes. But that's just, reality and history from my own perspective. I must be wrong. I'm probably Hamas after all. In teaching this, schools should be mindful of the facts about the law and biological sex and gender reassignment. There is significant debate, and they should be careful not to endorse any particular view or teach it as fact. Okay, fine. Again, that's what I will do. The problem with that, of course, is if I'm dealing with somebody who sees themselves, for example, as non-binary, I also have to deal with that fact that they are there in front of me, and I don't have to be rude, despite what Helen, Sex Matters and James want me to be. It's not my job, certainly isn't going to do the young person any good whatsoever. I'm often told, as a SEN teacher, sometimes by other teachers themselves, that I should just do things. It's really weird that the public seem to think that I as a teacher can't do anything, and yet a lot of my colleagues seem to think that I can just magically do things. If a child goes over the fence and they've run off, sometimes members of staff will say to me, "Can you just go and get them back?" To which my answer is always, "No. You go and do it." It's easy to say these things. In order to get a child back into school, usually takes about 3 hours of my time, unless you want the police involved. Or, if they've gone far enough, you have to get the police involved. You see, I do actually know what my job is, and I tend to know my job very, very well, in ways that, let's face it, the vast majority of people that tell me what to do in schools don't, because they're not qualified. Lots of people will say to me things like, "Oh, parents know their own children best." Which I can assure you, they don't. Parents rarely know what's best for their children, and I've certainly had a lot of meetings with people who are most insistent that they know my job a lot better than me. They normally come away thinking that I am the rudest person they've ever met, but that's just me usually becoming exasperated after 2 hours of people telling me to do things which I can't do. Anyway, leaving that aside, for example, they should not teach as fact that people have a gender identity. Okay, As fact, I don't anyway. Schools should avoid language and activities which repeat or enforce gender stereotypes. Good. That's your sexism thing. Various people on the right that don't like this are banging on about misanthropy, that thing about blokes that I can never pronounce properly. Except, of course, there isn't any of it, so we don't tend to do that. Schools should be mindful to avoid any suggestion that social transition is a simple solution to feelings of distress or discomfort. Okay, good. We don't. I would never do such a thing because that isn't reality. But you'll notice with this that what it basically does is open me up inevitably to parents disliking the fact that I've opened my mouth at all, which is section 28 all over again. And it's very, very likely when the proper guidance for this comes out that, that's what exactly is going to happen. Somebody somewhere from a Christian organisation heavily backed by Sex Matters and their, I don't know, whatever it is, Tufton Street style funders, will find a Christian concerned parent that finds something that somebody like me hasn't liked. And they will therefore use it as a wedge issue to make sure that this stuff doesn't happen in schools. But as I told the House but a few moments ago to the member's question, the problem with that is that we will end up with those glorious days under Margaret Thatcher where we aren't allowed to teach that children have an inalienable right to be anything, even though we didn't. You can see the problems there were around that. And if you want to go back to that, that's fine. But for God's sake, don't kid yourself. It's about children. It really isn't. It's about your own feelings and your own inability to deal with other people. You can be a bigot as much as you like, but by God, don't expect me to be one on your behalf. Anyway, do enjoy. Have a lovely damp weekend. If you are going to be arrested, make sure it's for a good cause. Not Palestine action, you understand. That would certainly be wrong.